Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blanks and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast. This is Drew hanging out here with you today. Again, a little bit of fun, we'll be carefree because the end's going to get pretty dark. So let's just start out here with the beginning of our show. I want to talk about a show that I've come to love. It's one of those shows that was recommended to me by a friend. He always watches a lot of adult cartoons, and he had sent this off to me, and that's Rick and Morty. And if you're not watching this show, if you're into it's not particularly raunch, I don't know. If you listened to the show before, you know my type of humor, know the type of stuff I like to talk about. You know that the Rick and Morty is right up my alley, as it could be up yours as well. The background of the show was the creators of the show produced this little short that was supposed to be Doc Brown and Marty McFly, and they had these voices that, I mean, the guys clearly aren't really voice actors, but it was sort of like this homage to Back to the Future, one of their favorite movies. That short that got into a lot of internet fame branched out to being asked for, hey, can we do a show with these characters that clearly were inspired by these two, but not necessarily those two. So then they created Rick Sanchez and Morty, and then the show branched out from there. And the show actually goes into some pretty cool sci-fi ideas that they've incorporated, mostly with the infinite universes and the comedy that can exist in the concept that there exists a universe where anything that you can think of, that's the way it is. And there was a lot of excitement and anguish coming from the fans about it, considering that the time it took between the first season and the second season, over, I think it was like, 12 to 18 months? It took over a year to get the second season out of the show. And it's just come to be that this show is so incredibly funny. And I got to tell you, if you're not watching it, please do. And it's part of the reason why it's so funny and the stuff that they allow to do is because the main voice actors, being the creators of the show that are Rick and Morty, they are surrounded by true professionals. Chris Parnell coming, from SNL and Archer. The rest of the cast clearly have scripts, and they clearly have an idea and a direction of where they're going, and a dialogue that they get to perform, and they're pros. But Rick and Morty and the guys that do those particular voices, and also for other characters on the show, they clearly can do whatever they want. That they seemingly don't edit out slip-ups. They don't cut out the imperfections, and they really allow seemingly for the show to get recorded first, and then they animate over it. So there's 2 episodes now in the show where it's alternate dimensional cable, and clearly there is no script for the type of shows and the type of commercials that are recorded for these episodes. It's also and they keep the improv. So if they're recording a line that's based around a concept of something that they're trying to do, and they change the idea in the middle of it, the animation just moves towards that movement in logic and the movement in the dialogue. And it creates for it's so funny for the improv moments as well as the ones that are clearly scripted and very tightly produced with the action and just the jokes and the concepts they do. The logic never leaves, and simply because they've opened up to the infinite universes, that anything goes is a part of the world. So as wild as it can possibly get, it all makes sense in the confines of the show. And they play on a lot of tropes in action and a lot of tropes in sci-fi, and they go into a lot of this stuff with the relationship between Morty's parents, and they're very self-aware in that regard, and they talk about it. They make a joke about like, oh, I bet all they're doing now is having some stereotypical fight about their relationship, and that's basically their through line, their character's through line of the show. And Morty's sister Summer, as she's brought into the fold, now the whole family's into the fold and know what Rick and Morty are up to, and just finished watching season 2, and what I have to give credit for a lot, although each show exists in their own episode, is that there is a through line, and there's a lot of callback when it comes to this show. When they make mention of previous episodes or bring in characters from previous episodes, and it's really unraveling a mystery of who Rick is and the stuff that he's done in his past, and all comes to bear in a lot of these. And the show has reached such a cult iconic status that lull between the first and second seasons, they even make fun of in the season finale of the show for season 2. I hate to sound graphic, but the character Mr. Poopy Butthole, which they even in the episode that he appears in, they keep calling him something different, which further goes to show like how loose of a format this show is, the way the script goes, that it really just plays into how long it takes to make the episodes. Clearly, they're not spending a lot of time writing the scripts for these 22-minute episodes, but the creators, they just kind of do whatever they want, and they're really not held to a particular timeline. So they make fun of that lull between the seasons, like, hey, tune in for next season, should be about a year and a half. And it just go through and watch the show. I watch it on Hulu. The first 2 seasons are up on Hulu right now. Go ahead. But what had just come out recently, another addition, not just as far as the show goes, is they got a hold of a court tape. So like the stenographer, like the actual court readings of this trial, and then very loosely animated. It wasn't as tight as the show was, but then they have Rick and Morty being the voices of the defendant and the judge, and Morty is the judge and Rick is the defendant, and they're taking the actual court report from the trial, and just those words said alone. So this actual trial that existed is already funny as it is, with the content where they talk about the defendant who's wanting to get a new public defender or represent himself, and talks about the reasons why, and they talk about discovery, and Morty playing the judge is so funny because he's being clearly more mature than Rick's defendant character, which is usually how a lot of the times it is on the show, with Morty trying to be the voice of reason, and then he ends up finding out how wrong he is. And a lot of the show's great because it really comes to show how altruism is really kind of phony and illogical, and it's really self-serving and trying to gratify your emotion as opposed to the reality or logic. And the character of Rick in the final episode, he said he never bothered being nice because it's just something stupid people do to hedge their bets. And it is brash, and the violence can get a bit graphic. It's kind of funny. Or there's these parts in the episode where something is happening that is wrong, but you're not really sure. Almost like the South Park episode where Earth is on TV and they meet the aliens that run the thing, and they're doing like the weird drugs and all the sexual acts, and they're not sure. They're like, I know this is wrong, but I don't know what it is I'm looking at. So they do that a lot in Rick and Morty, and it's so loose, but the animation itself is pretty tight, and the stuff they get into, it's funny, and it has emotional depth in which they use it's a lot of that, almost like how, and they probably, if the creators ever heard me say this, almost a comparison to Scrubs, where it can be kind of zany and cartoonish and funny at one moment, and then they're almost in the next few seconds, it can take a turn into something serious and dramatic. And, like Scrubs or Weeds does a lot of that too, where it's just it's just such an up and down thing where it's not taking itself too seriously, but it really lends itself towards making sense to the character. And season 2 ends with that, and they're playing like Nine Inch Nails Hurt and this whole thing. So just check it out. They're pretty quick to get through. It really seems like it goes by really fast. And I don't know if that's just because the runtime's short or just because it flows so quickly. There's really not a slow moment. There's really not a lot of slow moments in the show. So check it out. It's Rick and Morty. You can catch it on Hulu right now. That concludes the first segment of the show. We'll be right back. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, everybody, we are back as the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast. This next segment may be a little bit light for you folks. If you're single, you may have no idea what I'm talking about, or if you're a parent and you only make your kids watch, I don't know, Christian television or something, you may not know what I'm talking about, but I want to talk about this phenomenon known as the Wiggles. And by the time the Wiggles came into prominence in the United States, I was already too old for the Wiggles. Now, they've been around for like 20 years. They're Australian in origin. And they were musicians that I guess weren't getting enough gigs on their own. And one of the members of the band, he had a major in child psychology or something of that nature. So he was into writing songs that were really angled for kids and kind of learning and having fun and just having kids respond to. Now, it may seem like it's not genuine or it's a little bit hacky or whatever, but if you can be successful in the children's market, you are going to be huge. And the Wiggles became enormous. In fact, at one point in their touring career, because they didn't just have a TV show, they were making albums and they were touring. I mean, they were a band that had a show, a live show for kids, and they still do live shows, but now they're, primarily television oriented. At one point, I mean, the Wiggles were doing between 600 to 700 shows a year. And for those of you that went to public school and don't want to do the math on that, there are only 365 days in a year. So the Wiggles were doing, on average, between 2, sometimes 3 shows a day where they were at. That's how popular they were. And it's not just because they want to do 2 to 3 shows because they need the money or whatever else. That was the demand for the Wiggles. The demand being met with the supply was them doing 2 to 3 shows a day. It's bananas. They maybe had, like 2 days off, 2 to 3 days off, maybe 2 weeks, 2 days off a week. But they were just hammering out shows. And then they got a TV show. Now they've gone through different iterations of the cast. And Anthony, I believe it's Anthony, he's the only original Wiggles member that's still on the show, that goes with the show. And clearly he looks to be the oldest. So one of them got sick, had to leave for medical reasons. The other guys just left. And then they're methodical too, because the people that they have on the show now that are Wiggles, they were some of the ancillary cast, dressed up in some kind of costume or whatever, but they were doing the shows, or they would sub in for other Wiggles during the live shows. And they then became part of the main cast. And now what's the current Wiggles cast features a girl for the first time in the entire 20-plus year span of that band. They now have a girl Wiggle, Emma, and she is cute as a button. I will say, I got a bit of a crush. I got a dad crush on Emma Wiggle, the yellow Wiggle, and they just put out an album of just her. Just Emma from the Wiggles got her own album because she's become the most popular Wiggle, like probably of all time. So seeing that there was such a large little girl audience of this show who had nobody to relate to for 20 years in the show, finally they get a girl Wiggle, and it's like half, if not more than half their audience can put themselves into this one character. I mean, you still got three guys to choose from for the boys to like, but they finally got a girl Wiggle, and she's huge. It's a phenomenon with Emma Wiggle, and of course that allows. I mean, other than just her being the first female Wiggle and everything, it also balances out the sound of the group. So now you have these three voices. They got a bass, and they got a tenor, and they got a baritone, and then you have a female voice coming along. It also helps with the dynamic of coming up with new songs, because now you have a new character in there to go off of. And they've never been bigger, it seems. And like I said, when the Wiggles became popular here, I was already out of that phase, and now I'm a dad. And with my oldest, there was never really a prominent Wiggles thing. And in fact, I'm trying to remember what we used to do to silence the kid whenever she got upset. But she's always just been a bit of a quiet kid, kind of did whatever she wanted on her own. But she got into TV shows fairly early on. But I would watch like Batman the Animated Series with her, and she watched a lot of superhero stuff. And she enjoys music, and she enjoys watching people sing. But we mostly just watch movies and stuff, like Disney movies and stuff. But my youngest, my baby, it's sometimes the only thing that will quiet her down is putting on the Wiggles. They cast a spell, I swear. And I mean, when I was young, there was like the Moffats, that was big for kids at the time. But again, I never got into that stuff. I was watching stuff on TV. I didn't have like Kids Bop CDs, and I didn't watch a lot of kiddie programming other than, like Barney and Shiny Time Station. And in my mind, that was it. And then the Wiggles comes along, and man, they cast a spell. Like Blue's Clues had done. What else? But people watch Dora the Explorer, although I think Dora the Explorer is a garbage show. There's like 5 minutes of actual show, and the rest of us are just waiting for you to respond. But the Wiggles, man, they have the silver bullet, man. They got the golden touch for getting kids to just get zoned in on them. And it came from a very simple concept. I mean, when they were like, oh, we're the Wiggles, and they just made these really quick, uber repetitive songs that kids could sing along and dance to, and they're like, oh, we'll just, wear these different color shirts. And they weren't even by then like, I'm the yellow Wiggle, I'm the red Wiggle, and stuff like almost kind of like a joke or on a lark, that it's expanded into this whole thing. And now it's like a saga of who is the yellow Wiggle and who is the red Wiggle. And they just put my baby in such a great mood. And I want to be able to take that formula and find a way to monetize it for myself. But I tell you all about the Wiggles and the crazy power that exists with them. We listened to the Just Emma album, and I don't know, are the rest of the Wiggles helping her out? Because she only sang like a couple of songs that the Wiggles would have written and put on their show. But other than that, she kept singing all these old standard folk tunes, and a lot of them were French. And I was just like, what kind of album is this? Is it Emma sings some obscure standards, or I thought we were going to get Wiggles songs but just featuring her? But no, I mean even a song like "Say the Dance, Do the Dance," which I had seen and I've played and I've heard a billion times with all the Wiggles. I thought they were just going to put that on the CD, but no, it's just her singing a version of that, and it's way shorter. So, in all honesty, the Emma of the Wiggles album is kind of sad, to tell you the truth. As popular as she is, and I think that's great, I think she still needs the confines of her bandmates, writing songs about putting a teddy bear to sleep, or doing some kind of obscure dance. I never knew the names of so many dance moves since the Wiggles. I mean, outside of Now That I Can Dance, you know, the one they had from Dirty Dancing, I knew like the mashed potato and doing the twist. You know, I knew those, but the Wiggles, man, it's insane. And trying to find them on TV, I've only found like whole episodes on Hulu because we're desperate to find out. Netflix doesn't have it, Amazon doesn't have it, unless I think you pay for it. So we kept trying to find the affiliates of the Wiggles and what station they air on, because my wife is crazy to find Wiggles stuff just to get my daughter to stop screaming. So. But even then, my older daughter's become pretty into it too. So the Wiggles, man, I want to know the key, and then I want to capitalize on it. No fab, we'll do that sometime soon. All right, so you're listening to the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast. We will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, we are back. Golden State Media Concepts television podcast. Hey, did you know that the Olympics are coming this year? Yep, it's that fourth year. The last one was in 2012. It's 2016. It's time to get back to the Summer Olympics. So now is that time of year, that time of every 4 years where we pretend to like swimming and gymnastics. But I don't want to talk to you about the events that are going on in the Olympics. You already know the events that occur in the Olympics. You may catch a bit of badminton going on. Sometimes they show some more of the obscure sports that are going on, but mostly they like to keep to track and field, swimming, and gymnastics. Those are the biggest ones that they try to go to. And track and field with all that, with the steeplechase, with the marathon, the dashes are primarily important, establishing who's the fastest in the world, all that stuff, as well as all the swimming events. So you may get to see some like the indoor bike races, maybe some other stuff like the trampoline. That's an Olympic sport. You may catch some wrestling or even some fencing action. The fencing action is kind of fun. But I don't want to talk to you about the sports that are going on in the Olympics. I want to talk about the crazy shenanigans that are occurring in Rio. It's in Rio. It's in Brazil this year. And I don't know the process of vetting the locations for the Olympics, but in the past few choices that they've gone through, we all knew about the craziness with Beijing and the Beijing Olympics and all the stuff that they did. And then we all knew about the crazy happenings for the Sochi, Russia Winter Olympics. and everybody reporting on how just crazy awful the conditions were, all of that. Well, no shortage of controversy involving the Rio Olympics. And I just want to point out this article just as one of the examples we're going to go through, because I just want to talk about how crazy everything is going on around around the Olympics. So this one is involving drug dealers in Rio have recently been taking advantage of the Olympics coming to their town by selling cocaine bags that sport the Olympic logo on it and have the Rio 2016 topper on it. It's insane. So they've been busting a lot of these. It says written on the logo are the words Rio 2016. Keep away from children. And it's just one of those. I mean, they've already talked about the idea of the Zika virus being there. Crime rates are going up. There's Russia's in the headlines with possible state-sponsored doping. Russia right now with Putin is like it's James Bond level. It's like Rocky IV Russia right now. But right now, and that's just Russia. But going on in Brazil, outside the facilities just being garbage. A lot of Olympic teams, they've already filed complaints about, just unfinished rooms, the accommodation. I mean, when they announce that the Olympics are coming they do it about 4 or 8 years between that event. So that gives that country time to get a suitable Olympic village, basically. Now, they used to pick places that already had somewhat of an existing infrastructure that just needed little to do. But places like Beijing, I mean, they literally built all of that for the Olympics. And Rio was coming into a bit of that thing. So they announced, hey, Rio de Janeiro is going to be our next Olympics down the pipe in 2016. So get on it. And they're talking about blocked toilets, leaky pipes, exposed wiring. So quick jobs that had been done that really should have just been settled by now. And the Olympic Committee, I don't know if they're following up on this. I don't know if they inspect the grounds thoroughly before they send all of the teams out there. But it's pandemonium out there. Not just the drugs and not just the crime, but from this article, this is from The Sun. It's a UK thing. Let's quote the admission coming after Australia's delegates said it would not move into the Olympic Village because it was not safe already. So a lot of these teams aren't even wanting to go there. And there's, New Zealand and Italy's delegations both said that they had been forced to fix problems with electricity and plumbing. Argentina said on Monday it reserved accommodation outside the village for part of its delegation. The Dutch team said their own staff had resolved many of the issues that beset their building, but they threatened to seek financial compensation for their work. So the idea, of the Olympics bringing people together and having this sort of unity that's going on, it's just not it's not working out. And there's another one. Here's from Breitbart. I'm pretty sure you've read about the folks at the Olympics are handing out protection. Let's just say protection for some activities, and they get a daily allotment. That's been another one of the organizers of the Rio Summer Olympics provide an average of 41 prophylactics and as well as some other aids per athlete competing at the games, because there's a lot of hanky panky going on. It also keeps the threat of disease. Apparently, they've been hit with a wave of that recently. It's insane that there's so much debauchery. But obviously, athletes are pumped up, so it's not a surprise that there's a lot of that going on. And obviously, we never hear a lot about that type of stuff that goes on. But now in the day of social media, and the more sports you allow, the more people you allow, the more background comes about. So it's a lot of a lot of potential exposure that goes on in more ways than one when you're an Olympic athlete. Amongst other concerns, there was Gus Kenworthy, an athlete. He was a skier, freestyle. He had come out before the Sochi Games in Russia, and he knew the possibility of him not being well received due to Russia's lack of care by way of human rights. So there's a bit of concern about also openly gay athletes that are coming out, coming to Rio. How are they going to be received? And this is from Outsports reporting on this. There might be 500 or so gay athletes competing in Rio, but almost all of them are closeted. And he wants them all to come out. He wants them all to be loud and proud. Obviously, it's easier to assume that Russia. Russia's just, they're a known bad guy, but you also have in in Brazil is a highly, as much as you like to think as they're a bit debaucherous in Brazil, they are a fairly high Catholic community. And so it's very well possible that homosexual competitors in this Olympics could be received even worse than they were in Russia. So it's hard to be LGBTQ in Brazil because there's a lot of threats. So it just seems like this, and this may not be the last Olympics that this is going to occur in. So with these new countries that are getting a lot of opportunities with their different backgrounds and their governments, it's honestly exposing a lot of the Western world to a lot of conditions that are happening in these countries that we never knew about. We think Brazil, we think a lot of these countries that they're having these in, you always think of tourist destinations, you always think of the bright spots, and now we're finding out about the dark little seedy spots. So, hey, August 5th is when the Olympics come on. It should be a very interesting time. Obviously, I don't think NBC Sports is going to be covering a lot of that. Mostly what they'll want to do is focus a lot on these vignettes that really point out the positive and everything and just try to bury all the stuff regarding the negative. So, hey, it's a fun time. Unity, peace, all that fun business. All right, I've had a lot of fun talking with you guys on the show here today. You can check us out on GSMCpodcast.com or iTunes or anywhere you can get a subscription to podcasts. Check out our other programming as well. You can follow us on Facebook and or Twitter, whatever your preferred platform is. Hey, I've been Drew. You've been wonderful. Thanks for listening, and this concludes your broadcast day.